Connor, Dr. Neil O'Connor of China Sourcing Academy, and Ricebox.com, that's a strategic consulting company set up in Hong Kong. I want to talk about 4 things today, and that is about the latest initiative of the central government in China, focusing on Made in China and energizing or reinventing their whole factory system, manufacturing system. Made in China 2025 is the plan. I want to talk also about the mind of the supplier and factory management trends that I've seen through my 15 visits to factories during the last 3 months. And finally, we'll start with 10 mega trends. So before I get going, I want to show you 2 videos. What you've got in front of you are 2 Hoover Board manufacturers. Now, you know, in the past 6 months, there's been a spate of fires. Not a spate, we're talking about hundreds of fires all around the world, and lighting up people, lighting up houses. It's actually caused a lot of damage to the extent that airlines ban Hoover boards on board. And so I want to go to the factories to find out what is the difference between a good Hoover board and a bad Hoover board. And I did find that out. Part of my whole reason of being in working with suppliers in China is to help them become world class. And my job as an academic is to actually go into the field and find out what is going on in the field and engage with real industry leaders, and for the purpose of trying to help improve manufacturing in this area of the world. And so we have 2 Hoover board manufacturers here, and I'd like to have a show of hands. Which one of these Hoover board manufacturers would you think is making a good Hoover board, and which factory do you think is making a bad Hoover board? Can we have a show of hands here? And you're probably looking at this and thinking, wow, this looks like a sophisticated assembly line here, where every person is just doing one little task and then it is moved on. This is your traditional manufacturing model. Whereas here, it's more like a sweatshop, basically building the Hoover board from scratch, and it doesn't move to other people. The people that are building it know the 100 plus processes that are needed to make the Hoover board. My whole excitement of actually going into these factories is to find out what is going down on the ground in China, and that is what I'm about. Too many academics are around that don't tell us much about what's happening on the ground. There's too many consultants around that are trying to sell their own services. I'm in between. I want to be the academic that actually really understands what's going on the ground. And this is what we saw with these Hoover board factories. Notice they're testing the Hoover board here. And this is the actual machine test of the Hoover board. Later on, they'll have the physical test where we go for a ride on the Hoover board. Over here, we're going to test the Hoover board in a minute. We're going to have someone that just rides it. There's no machine test at all. And we'll see him. There he is. We're testing the Hoover board already. There's QC. All right. So this is QC in Factory A. This is QC in Factory B. Which factory do you think is going to make the Hoover board that catches on fire? You don't know until you go into the factories. And I'm really excited. This is why I go into China to actually find out where are the good suppliers? Where are the weak suppliers? What are their challenges to becoming world class? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because now the China government has released this new plan. It was over a year ago now. Li Keqiang came out and said, we want to re-energize or reinvigorate the manufacturing model of China, and we call it Made in China 2025. And we're focused on 10 key industries, and that's the focus of the Made in China. So we'll come back to this Hoover board example later, but I just want to show you that my whole focus is really, I really want to know what is going on the ground, what is happening on the ground in China. Why is it that some Hoover boards work? Why is it that some other Hoover boards don't work? Not many people know the difference between a good factory and a bad factory. So let's keep going here. You can see there's the QC here, all right? And there's the QC here. Which Hoover board would you buy? Okay, so let's get into the good stuff, shall we? All right, so I want to talk about several things. Made in China, the mind of the supplier, factory management trends and 10 mega trends. So we're going to get straight into the Made in China summary. Now, we know there's a bit of documentation here, so I don't want to waste too much of your time, but the focus that they talked about the 1, 2, 3, 4, and obviously they've got a long time horizon stretching out until the 1 century anniversary of the forming of the Communist Party, which will be 2049. So this is a huge multi-decade plan that China has for Made in China. And there are several guidelines, but what is important is to know which industries are affected, because if you're investing in China, or if you're looking to import into China, or you're looking to compete in China or to joint venture in China, it'll be good to know which industries will be around in 5 years, in 10 years' time, which are going to be those industries that are going to be supported by the government, not those industries that are sunset where the government is going to sort of push you out, either push you out of a province into a province in West China where you probably don't want to go, or they'll push you out into another country that has cheaper labour. And we've seen that happen a lot in the fashion industries, especially in Shenzhen, especially just inside Shanghai. Okay, what are these 10 industries? There's energy saving and new energy, power equipment, biological and high performance medical devices, new materials, next generation IT, advanced rail transportation equipment, advanced CNC machine tools and robots, agricultural machinery, aerospace equipment, marine engineering equipment and high-tech ships. Really interesting that a lot of these industries come under the PMI, and this is the PMI we take notice of every month to find out, is China growing or is China not growing? You know, for the last 6 months the PMI is sort of going down, 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 and it's been below 50 every month for the last 6 months. It's not a good sight. But what you need to realise is that the PMI is a very narrow indicator of what's happening in China. It only measures construction, heavy industry and automotive. It doesn't measure any of the other industries or some of these industries that are in these top 10. And so we need to realise that some of the initiatives that the China government is focusing on may not actually show up in the PMI in the future. So think about that. If you're in portfolio management, the PMI may become less and less of a relevant indicator of the growth of China in terms of production. So notice how some of the Made in China industries overlap with their strategic emerging industries that have been identified years earlier, and also the circular economy. And this is basically the basic economy of China that keeps the bread and butter going in China. All right, so notice that there's a long-term plan here. There is the 2025 where China wants to join the manufacturing powers by reducing the gap and making breakthrough in priority areas. They want to consolidate the position, and by the time 2045, so you're talking about 25 years out from now, we want to achieve breakthroughs to lead innovation, join the top group of manufacturing powers. So this is the sort of the vision that the 2025 has. So we all understand that China's undergoing this manufacturing malaise where the PMI has been below 50 for the last 5 or 6 months. That was early last year, but this actually goes on into 2016. It's still below 50 today. So it has been contracting, and as I said, some of these 10 industries are not part of the PMI, so you will not see necessarily all of this China 2025 change in the PMI anytime soon. Okay, so notice the mission is to give manufacturing a makeover. Number 2, to form the world's factory to planet's leading manufacturing power by 2025. Number 3, evaluate the perception of China goods from made in China to innovated in China. And then we understand that is a key challenge. I want to talk to you in a minute in this latest section where I actually talk about how these factories going that I've visited to in Shenzhen in the last 3 months. Rising domestic content of core components and materials to 40% by 2020, 70% by 2025. Set a target of SEI, strategic emerging industries, related industries, to account for 8% of the economy by 2015, 15% by 2020, established 40 billion yuan innovation fund to sponsor new business, supporting the creation of manufacturing innovation centres, 15 by 2020, 40 by 2025. So these are very bold plans that the China government has for under the Made in China 2025. Understand China's research and development expenditure as a percentage of GDP has been going up over time, and this is something that continues to rise even though the PMI is going down. So this is stands China in good stead for the future, okay, even though the PMI shows there's a demise. But remember, that is a narrow indicator of what's really happening in China. So what are those 10 areas in a little bit more detail? What are the numbers behind these 10 areas? New energy vehicles, so we're talking about Tesla, we're talking about electric vehicles, this is very important. Sales of 1 million domestic autos by 2020, 70% of the market. Sales to reach 3 million or 80% of the market share by 2025. Okay, and that's really interesting where it is today because it's very low percentage today. I think the Hong Kong government have purchased 36 odd electric vehicles as taxis 2 years ago, and they're still working in Hong Kong at the moment, but they haven't expanded into more electric vehicles. Power equipment, they want to achieve 2 trillion yuan by 2020. Biological high performance medical devices, the scale industry to be 600 billion yuan by 2020, 1.2 trillion yuan by 2025. Wow, this is very important, biological and high performance medical devices. Note, I've just interviewed actually Grom, that's a medical device manufacturer in Hong Kong. It's a startup, and they're actually using 3D printing technology to make all of their equipment. And so it's all we're talking about light modular medical support equipment that can actually go around and protect you from injury and things like that. But there are startups in this area already as we speak. New materials, industry is scaled to be 2 billion yuan by 2020, 10 billion yuan by 2025. IT, the market share of domestic service and telecom finance sectors to reach 75% by 2020, 90% by 2025. Hence, there's a great emphasis in all of these areas to have a greater domestic component of the industry. So hence, they're really supporting for manufacturers to innovate, particular in these areas, so they actually can become a greater share of the market. All right, 5 more. You all know railways, it's naturally a heavy industry. More than 30% of business come from overseas markets by 2020, 40% by 2025. At the moment, China is still definitely reliant on overseas technology for its rollout of its rail infrastructure, which is a pretty big rollout, if I may say so. Robotics, domestically made robotics to have 50% market share by 2020, more than 70% by 2025. Agricultural machinery, industrial value to be 600 billion yuan by 2020, 800 billion yuan by 2025, 1 trillion yuan by 2030. Aviation industry revenue to reach 100 billion yuan by 2020, 2 trillion yuan by 2025. Shipbuilding, China design build ships of high technology, aiming for 40% market share globally, not just domestically, globally by 2020, 50% by 2025. Okay, so what are the actions? Well, they're supporting strategic SMEs and strategic emerging industries. There's leaner and greener manufacturing. There's a recent emphasis about the water. Water is a scarce resource in China, and so they have another positive initiative that actually targets the use of the water across those 7 key river systems in China to actually make sure that the dirty industries are actually shut down, or they've innovated and moved to higher technological operations so they don't use as much water or expel any dirty water into these 7 river systems. That is another strategy that is actually going on as we speak. More fairness and transparency, promote innovation, and initiate tax reform to reduce the overall corporate tax burden. So it's very interesting that the key actions can support foreign companies operating in China. What are the implications? Well, let's give you some real examples. Foxconn, within 5 years, 30% of the labour force will be replaced by robots, releasing them to do something more valuable, okay? A highly inventive firm which holds many American patents, building all of its automation in-house. What you don't know is that actually Foxconn has actually learnt a lot in its robotics placement in the assembly line from, you know, HTC over in Taiwan, you know, the cell phone manufacturer, and they've actually worked with them to find out, well, how do we actually automate the assembly line? Where do we automate the assembly line? Nike has seen a lot of its suppliers decamp to cheaper Vietnam, but still get 60% of its components from the mainland China, and look for suppliers capable of developing novel techniques that can inspire new products. For example, Under Armour is working with a Chinese bra manufacturer that made the glue for bras, and now that same glue, that same sticking technology is part of the Speedflow shoe that is made by Under Armour at the moment. So and that's made in China, not Vietnam, not Cambodia, China. So very interesting. There is a lot happening in the sportswear industry in some of the technologies that are now being used in making footwear. There are security concerns, of course, because when you start to innovate, where do you copy? Do you design? If you're a foreign company and you're working with these suppliers, how do you actually protect your technology? So there's this notion of design for manufacturing, which is very, very important. If you want to get your designs efficiently produced by a manufacturer in China, you need to work with engineers that know how to design your product for a Chinese factory, not for a German factory or a Japanese factory, which may be working at a higher level of standards. No, for a China factory. So, so where do you source your designer? Do you have your designer in-house with a factory, and hopefully that they won't copy and you know, parallel produce your new design? Or do you physically have the designs in Hong Kong or outside of China? These are questions that designers or startups need to ask in terms of how they protect their innovations. The level of industrial automation remains a key problem. Even the level of manufacturing has improved in the past decade. So there's still great, manufacturers in China are still to much extent very much labor-based. The use of robots is even less widespread, despite China is the largest and fastest growing market for industrial robots. There are 282 industrial robots to 10,000 factory workers in Germany compared to 14 in China. So there's still a lot to go, and some of the factories that I've been to, and I share with you in a part 2 seminar where I actually show you where these innovations are working or not working. So these are some of the implications we need to be aware of. There is a China pitch for a high-speed rail projects around the world. Got the biggest overseas contract with Nigeria, a 12 billion railway deal last year, but there's uncertainty for foreign MNCs. China has going for a huge market demand and huge labour force. So still, China is still large. You may want to manufacture in China for China, not necessarily for the world. And awareness that whether your business is in one of these top 10 is a very important consideration that you need to think about going forward. So are there some foreign firms that are thinking about this going forward? Yes, there are. Across these 10 industries, we can see Beijing Hyundai, Shanghai GM, and Dongfeng Nissan are 3 key joint ventures that are currently active in working with energy saving and new energy vehicles, and they're competing with BYD. Remember, BYD was that battery manufacturer a little over a dozen years ago that went to Motorola 3 times to become their approved supplier. The first 2 times they were not given approval. On the 3rd time they become the approved supplier after improving their Six Sigma, after implementing and improving, getting all their quality gates in line. Motorola approved them, and the rest is history. Now BYD is one of the largest vehicle manufacturers in China. But now BYD naturally has has that pedigree of a battery manufacturer, it stands to reason that it would be an energy saving in new energy vehicles. There are some, pointing out some of the other areas in power equipment, we have Schneider Electric, Elstrom, General Electric, definitely in that space already. Biological and high performance medical devices, Johnson & Johnson, General Electric and Siemens. New materials, DuPont, Bass and BHP Billiton. New generation IT, we have RIM, yeah, your BlackBerry RIM, hard to believe, but they've sort of come back. And we have America Movil and Mobile Telesystems. They are players in this area in China as we speak today. What about the other advanced rail transportation? We have the Canadian company Bombardier, Japanese company Kawasaki Heavy Industries, and then we've got Elstrom. Over here we've got more Japanese companies, you know, not surprisingly, in the CNC machine tools and robots, Moriseki, Matsuria and Yamazaki Mazak. Okay, Japanese companies. And then we have ABB Limited, Kuka Robotics and Fanuc Corp also in this area. Now notice that there are a lot of Chinese companies that are top 3 domestic firms in these areas. So you really need to understand that the Made in China 2025 is about the government supporting these local firms, definitely. Of course they want transparency, but of course they're going to try and support them the best way they can so they can actually create that increased domestic portion of that manufacturing, as I showed you earlier in the trends that they want in the 2025. And the last 3 component areas, agricultural machinery, we have John Deere, not surprisingly CNH YTO Group. Here for aerospace equipment, we have Honeywell, Suzhou, and then we have Whitney, we have Boeing, obviously they're in that game, and the support, obviously they're working with manufacturers of aeroplanes in China as we speak. And then we've got marine engineering equipment and high-tech ships. China's always been big in shipbuilding, along with Korea and other countries in the region, but they want to be bigger. And of course, Maersk, Mediterranean Shipping Company and Hapag-Lloyd are big players in this area. So what I wanted to show you here is in those top 10, already there are particular industry segments that foreign companies are already in. And this has implications for the competition that they're going to go up against, especially with the large domestic firms that are already in this space. Let me just finish this first part to show you that this Made in China 2025, we're targeting 10 key industries. It has implications if you're a portfolio manager to understand the future of a particular industry segment that you are investing in or managing money in. It has implications if you're moving into China, you want a joint venture. It makes sense to actually go into China and be in one of these industries that has been targeted to grow over the next 10, 15, 20 years, and not invest in an industry that's in a sunset industry where the government may be on one of their weekend policy initiatives and comes out Monday and says, we want you to move out of this province, you need to move into an. And that has happened in some of the sunset industries. Okay, so and more indirectly they may put wages up, and then that forces you out anyway. So this is the different information that you need to understand, and how the 2025 can affect you as an investor, as a foreign direct investment, as a partner working with a domestic company that may be in these sectors. This is Neil O'Connor for China Sourcing Academy and Ricebox.com, part 1 of the China 25 strategy. Thank you.